And I'm speaking in very general terms, right? But you have to be able to understand these very simplistic things on how systems work and to be able to move on to the next phases of your career. And it's just gonna be the highest leverage thing that you can learn and be able to apply all different types of skills or learn all different types of things. Because after you start to understand the systems and kind of like the process flow of how things are manufactured and how things go through different processes, you'll start to learn more detailed things like degrees of freedom, like nesting, and I'll just go into a couple examples of that. Degrees of freedom. What is degrees of freedom? Degrees of freedom means in which way can something move about. If you're trying to pick up something, one of the big things that you have to do whenever you're picking something up is you have to control the degrees of freedom, right? If I grab something like this, and I only grab it right there, it's plausible it can hinge right here, and maybe this will cause problems, right? Maybe, hopefully you can see that, right? That there's a hinge right there. And so this degree of freedom is not being controlled at all, right? So in order to control that degree of freedom, we have to grab right here. So now you're controlling by this degree and this degree. So degree of freedom is one thing that you'll learn as you start to understand more about systems. You'll start to think more along the lines of like, okay, how do I control this part? What are different ways that I can pick this up? Should I use a gripper? Should I use a vacuum tool? And so there's so much when it comes to automation that we really have to dive into a particular exact topic to really say like, what is the thing you should learn, right? Because if I said like, what's the first thing to get started in robotics or automation, that means the whole thing, right? What's the first, like, so it helps to know like if it's a mechanical engineer, now we have to talk about things like degrees of freedom, right? Very important for somebody who's doing degrees of freedom. Or maybe the nesting, right? Which nesting means that we're equally placing components at an equal distance from one another, so that way the robot can pick. And if they're all 1 inch apart from one another, the robot program can also just be 1 inch apart from one another and be able to perform that pick operation. So somebody has to mechanically design that nest for all the things to be equally separated from one another. Then there's a small calculation to how many things can we fit on a nest versus what's the robot's reach. So there has to be analysis on the robot reach. And so I'm just giving like a bunch of brief examples of some things you'd have to learn in these different skill sets.